The move-out inspection checklist for Tucson landlords. When it comes to move-outs, if you miss something, you will end up paying for it. Want to protect yourself from making a small mistake that could cost you big money as it relates to the move-out? So go to the link below and download your free copy of the sample move-out checklist, and then come back to this video and I'll walk you through how to conduct the move-out inspection using the checklist. Hi, Steve Schultz here from Blue Fox Properties. We've managed thousands of properties since 2009. We've continued to improve our move-out inspection checklist along the way. So let's get started. So the first thing, I want to give you a list of things to make sure you take with you to the move-out inspection. The first thing is the checklist. So there are a couple different ways to use the checklist. One, you might want to use it as is, and so as you come to each room, just re-look at those different items in the room that need to be covered, or you can actually take that checklist and blow it up. So in other words, if the house has, let's say, 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms, you might want to take that list, take the list for bedrooms and make 3 copies of that. For bathrooms, make 2 copies of that, etc., so that you can just make notes along the way and use it that way. But you want to make sure that you have the move-out checklist with you. Next, keys to the property. Now that sounds simple enough, but you got to make sure you have keys to the property that actually work, right? Did the tenant maybe rekey the locks during the tenancy, or something else happened so that you don't have keys that currently work? So you've got to make sure that the keys to the property currently work, or you're going to get out of the property, can't get in, it'll be a problem. Next is a camera, and you probably already have that, and you take it with you every day, and it's called your cell phone, right? So you want to make sure you have that, you know how to operate it, everything's good there, you have plenty of room on your camera, on your phone, to actually store the photos that you're going to take as well. So you want to make sure you have that covered and you're ready for that. Now, one of the things I also have in a link below is a link to a 360-degree camera. This is a really powerful tool, so I recommend it if you're not doing a lot of move-outs. They're pretty pricey, so it might not make sense for you. You know, they're somewhere in the range from $500 to $1,000, but depending on what camera you get. And by the way, the link is not sponsored, so I don't get anything if you buy a camera or don't buy a camera. I'm just giving you an example of what to take a look at. But the thing that's really powerful about the 360-degree camera, what you do is you set it up in the middle of the room, and then you take the photo. And what's that going to do is capture all of the walls, the ceiling, the floor, everything. So it's really, really powerful, because sometimes when you get in a security deposit disposition situation, the one photo that you wish you had is the one photo you're missing. So this will capture the entire room. So we actually use it inside the house. We'll use it outside as well. So that's a powerful way to capture like the driveway, let's say, plus the walls of the house, the exterior walls of the house as well. So really powerful tool. Again, a little bit pricey, may or may not make sense for you. And then the last thing I'd make sure you take with you is a lockbox to leave at the property with a key in it. So the idea here is then you don't have to go back to the property, because usually you're going to have to send vendors to the property to do some cleanup or some yard cleaning, something. It's pretty rare that there is absolutely no work that has to be done after the tenant moves out. So that way you already have a key at the property in the lockbox. Make sure you take another key that you have for the property and take that back with you, so you always have that extra key. So if something happens, maybe the vendor walks off with the key, puts it in his pocket, and forgets to take it back, whatever the case may be, you'll always have an extra key. All right, so before we launch into the actual conducting the move-out inspection itself, if all this sounds like a pain and you don't want to deal with it, and you have a rental house here in Tucson, Arizona, and you'd like to talk to us about managing that for you, happy to have that discussion with you, and we will take it from there. All right, so let's get into number 2, conduct the move-out inspection itself. So again, if you have that 360-degree camera, you can do shots in each room. You know, some people like to do it all up front with just the 360 camera, go around the house, put that in each room, do the shot. You might want to take it and do it as you go, or you might not, again, have that camera anyway. So depending on what you want to do, that's some different ways to handle the 360-degree camera shots. All right, our philosophy is we note things by exception. And what I mean by that, if it's fine, then you don't need to take a note or additional photo. However, if something is damaged, then you want to make a note and take the additional photo. So that's what we talk about when we say by exception, meaning it's only the damaged things that we're going to further document. All right, so let's go room by room, and including the exterior of the house, you know, so it's going to be, I'm going to give you some examples here of some of the different things that we're going to cover. I'm going to give you an example of the exterior front, the kitchen, and the bathroom. And the thing to understand is the move-out inspection really serves 2 purposes. At least that's the way we approach it here at Blue Fox Properties. One is to identify any items that are tenant damage, and 2 is to identify other repair items that are needed that are not tenant damage, but need to be taken care of, right? And so I'll give you some examples of that as we go along. So for starters, let me break down the exterior front and the different items we have there and kind of the viewpoint and how we look at it. So the first item is driveway. So what are you looking at there? You know, common tenant damage issues might be oil stains, rust stains, things like that that need to be cleaned off the driveway. On the other hand, owner issue that the owner would need to be taken care of would be like a major crack in the driveway, right? So maybe there's some major repair that needs to be taken care of there. You want to make sure you capture it, and so we can get a vendor out there to take a look at it and get that taken care of. The paint, the house, and the trim. So you're looking at the exterior of the house, seeing what needs to be taken care of there. You know, maybe the paint is peeling or just really faded. Whatever the case may be, typically that's not going to be a tenant damage issue, right? It's just wear and tear on the paint itself. But those are the things you're looking for, again, trying to capture, is there anything that needs to be addressed there? Landscape. So you're looking at the landscape, and tied in with that is the irrigation system as well. So what you're looking for, is there any trash? Are there any weeds? Are there dead plants? You know, anything like that, looking for and trying to determine, you know, again, is that tenant issue? Is that an owner issue? Typically an irrigation leak is not going to be the tenant, but you want to make sure you know about it so you can fix it, so you don't have a big water bill during the vacancy time between the time when the old tenant moves out and the new tenant moves in. Landscaping, plants, dead plants especially, are sometimes really, really hard to figure out of who's responsible. You know, if it's something where all the plants are dead in the front yard, let's say, and it's obvious due to lack of water because maybe the tenants weren't watering it, that's one scenario. But maybe if it's just one or two plants, maybe it's just they got attacked by insects or something happened that, you know, they died that way. So sometimes landscaping is really tough to figure out. The next item is roof. You know, again, you're just looking at this visually to see, are there any missing shingles? Maybe there was a microburst or something like that that came through the neighborhood and tore some shingles off the roof of the house. So again, typically tenants aren't getting on top of the roof to do any damage to the roof. So that would be another owner expense typically. Gutters, downspouts, are they present? What are the condition? You know, are they damaged? Are they blocked? Do they need to be cleared? Anything like that. Chimney, you know, again, from the exterior, anything weird going on there? You know, are there a bunch of black marks, soot marks on the exterior of the chimney that could indicate a problem with the chimney? So that's what this is just identifying those. Again, typically that would be an owner expense as well. All right, front fence, front gate, you know, is everything operable? Does it work? Is it clean? All that type of stuff. Visible trash and debris, we kind of already covered this in landscaping, but is there any other trash in the yard, anything like that that you need to be aware of and get cleaned up? The walkway, similar to the driveway, is there anything there that the tenant may have caused damage-wise, or like cracks, or maybe sometimes the sidewalk is really unlevel because it's settled? You know, those would be owner issues. So you're taking a look at the walkway. Exterior lights, you know, again, other than light bulbs, typically this isn't something that's going to be tenant-related damage. The only exception to that might be if the tenant put up, let's say, Christmas lights, and they penetrated the house exterior with hangers to put the lights up. You know, that could be something that could be a legitimate tenant charge because they did damage to the exterior of the house. The doorbell, again, typically not going to be a tenant expense, but what happens here a lot of times in Tucson is the sun just beats up that doorbell and it'll literally start to just fall apart and deteriorate. So that might be an owner expense to replace that doorbell. We have exterior water pipes. Are they insulated? You know, that's a common thing that comes up here, especially in the winter, as it relates to those external water pipes that sometimes can freeze. So that's something you want to be aware of. Again, typically going to be an owner expense to insulate those as well. And then landscape trimmed approximately 8 feet above the ground. This is the way our lease reads. And the idea behind that is just to have everything crisp, clean, and covered. We don't go out with a tape measure to say, hey, you know, this branch is 7 feet 10 inches and now that's a problem, right? The idea is just it's clean. You can walk around it. Let's say if it's a big tree, you could walk around the tree and not hit your head on branches and all that type of stuff. So that's kind of the idea behind that. And then if there was any other things that you noticed out in the exterior of the front yard. So that gives you kind of a brief breakdown of things we're looking for in the exterior, just to give you a feel for again, how we use this both for purposes of identifying maintenance issues that need to be taken care of, as well as potential tenant damage. So the next thing is the kitchen. So let's take a look at the kitchen and those different items there. So the first thing there is floor coverings. You know, it has type and condition. You know, let's say it is tile. You know, is that in good shape? Are there any cracked tiles? Is the grout good? Is the grout clean, right? And so again, depending on the situation, some of those could be owner items, some of those could be tenant items. Walls and baseboards and ceilings, are there any holes? Is there any damage? Ceilings in particular, you want to pay attention to for potential roof leaks. So that's something you want to pay attention to. So the ceilings, you know, typically not going to be a tenant expense item issue unless they put the holes in in the ceiling to hang things or whatever the case may be, but that's the idea behind that. Door hinges, knobs, locks, door frame. Those again are just trying to point your eyes to everything to make sure you look at everything. And so that's the idea of this entire checklist, is if you go through all these items one by one in each room, it's really, really hard to miss anything, dare I say practically impossible. So that's the idea, is we're trying to make sure we're pointing our eyes and our attention to all these different items in the room as we go. Door stop, that's a common one. They're either broken, damaged, whatever the case may be, so you're identifying those. Are they there? Are they in good condition? Window glass, window sills and frames. You know, glass sometimes can be an issue, a tenant damage issue. Maybe a baseball went through the window, or, you know, something along those lines. So that could be an issue. Window sills and frames, looking at those as well. Window coverings, you know, blinds, curtains, shades, any of that kind of stuff. Are they there? What's the condition? You know, it's really common here in Tucson to have mini blinds or even the faux wood blinds. And sometimes just over time, those actually just, the sun again beats them up and they'll get brittle and break. Sometimes it's tenant damage, right? So depending on the situation. Window screens, what are the condition? Closet doors and frames, and then closet interior. For purposes of the property owner, I always recommend in the closets, again, look in the ceiling of the closet for water damage. Sometimes that's where roof leaks will leak. And so a lot of people don't catch that because, well, it's in the closet, and who looks in the closet, right? On a regular basis, it's certainly not into the ceiling. So that's what you want to be paying attention to there. Light fixture, fan, and combo, you know, is there anything broke? Light bulbs all there, working, all that kind of stuff. And then that falls with the fixture bulbs as well in the kitchen in this case. Electrical switches, outlets, phone jacks, cables. So what you're looking for here is sometimes tenants like to put their customized covers on these things. And so what I always recommend is taking it back to the regular generic outlet covers, right? And so that's the idea behind that. Smoke alarms and carbon monoxide detectors, are they there? Are they chirping? Are the batteries present? It's not uncommon at all for tenants to take out the batteries and not replace them. So that's what we're looking for too. The pantry, again, look at the ceiling, make sure you check that out, but all the shelves, are they clean? Are they in good shape? Countertops, wall cabinets, base cabinets. So in the sink base cabinet, which is the next item listed there, is you want to make sure that there are no leaks underneath the sink. So that's the idea behind that. But all the cabinets you're looking for, making sure, are the hinges in good shape? Or do the doors close correctly? And then similarly, the drawers, do the drawers all open correctly? Are those all in good shape? Sinks and faucets, anything leaking there? Garbage disposal, same thing, leak, is it in good condition? You might want to flip it on. Sometimes people put bottle caps in the garbage disposal that'll clunk around, or they drop something in it, whatever may be the case, want to make sure that's good to go. Then the stove, looking internally and externally, plus the stove vent hood, you know, is the fan in good shape? Is it working? Is the light bulb there? Does it have a little filter in the stove vent hood? All those types of things. Refrigerator inside and out, is the ice maker working? Is everything operable? And then the dishwasher and microwave, both interior and exterior as well. So making sure everything's in good shape there. So those are some of the things to cover for the kitchen, and again, give you a feel for what that's all about. And last but not least, let me just cover a bathroom. Obviously, a lot of these items are on, you know, the walls and ceilings, for example, are going to be in every room, right? So you're going to look at that. So I'm not going to speak to those. We've already covered that. But in bathrooms, obviously, what are the things that are different in a bathroom? Are going to be things like the medicine cabinet. You know, open that up, look in it. Does the door open and close correctly? Does the magnet attach, or whatever the case may be? You know, towel bars, toilet paper holders, are those in good shape? Are they there? Are some of them ripped off of the wall, or any damage relative to that? You know, the toilet, is it in good shape? Is the toilet lid and seat condition in good shape? And then the tub and shower area, as far as any grouting, caulking, anything like that. Again, a lot of times that's going to be owner expense to recaulk or regrout, because it's not something the tenant necessarily damaged. It's just over time, normal wear and tear. And then the exhaust fan too, you know, flip that on. Does it work? Everything good to go? And how is that working? So those are the three rooms that we wanted to take a look at, just to give you that feel for kind of how we use the checklist. And also, if there's anything else that needs to be documented in the property, do so. You know, like maybe there's a storage shed in the backyard or something like that. So just document it, look through it, make sure everything's good there. Or if not, you know, identify those things. All right, so before leaving the property, there are a few things you need to do. Turn off all the lights, close all the blinds, curtains, shades, all that type of stuff. Make sure the thermostat has been adjusted as needed. it. So maybe in the winter months, you want to leave the inside of the house set at, I don't know, 55 or whatever the case may be, so the pipes don't freeze, right? So that's something to be aware of as well. And then lock all the doors of the house and place the one key in the lockbox. And again, remember to take one key with you. So if that key ever gets lost or something happens, you can still get into the property. All right, once you've done all that, you're gonna head back home or to your office or wherever you go next. And what you're gonna wanna do is take that inspection and compare the notes and photos to the pre-move-in inspection to determine the tenant caused damages, if any, and then you're gonna begin the security deposit disposition process. So hopefully you've done this entire process before the tenant even moved in. You use the same process before the tenant moves in to be able to have that documentation so that you can compare it at move out. But the security deposit disposition, that's a subject for a whole nother video. So that's it for the move out inspection checklist. Don't forget to subscribe below. See you on the next video.